In this lesson, I'm going to add one more technique to the previous lesson on modeling fixed windows. Now, I was going to add this just as an extra option for you to look at. It is a little bit of a hybrid between the two. It is more like the one that we did originally on the right, which was the real speedy one, except that it's going to have the accuracy of the one on the left, but it's not going to have the editability of this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the same process in mind by creating that line on the outside of the window frame. I'm going to extrude it up in the same manner. And just before I start to organize any of the cross lines running vertically, so in other words, the segments that are going to be added to it, I'm going to just move the line to the side of the window. So basically what is happening is that the line on the right is aligned to the left edge of that frame, and so is this one. That means that my spacing will be constant since you're working in a center to center arrangement, and even though it's left to left. So now I'm going to add those two extra edges. So let's just add two segments there. And this window frame is slightly narrower. It's going to be 3 centimeters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to align it to there. I don't have my central snap turned on, so let's turn that on. And let's now zoom in here and then just snap that onto the center of that frame over there. So once you've checked both lines and you're sure that that's correct, now you know that your alignment is fine. What you can do now, instead of inserting all 3 polys, is you can right click on these 2 central lines and you can chamfer that to the width that you would want to use. So in this case it's going to be 0.15, which is 3 centimeters in total. So you can also double check that, just make sure that all your lines are lining up. And what you can do now is that to your entire object, you can insert that by 5 centimeters, which I believe is the width of the outside frame. It's slightly thicker. And let's just go and insert that. It's going to be by group or by, it's basically the entire group, so the whole thing gets inserted, and that's going to be by 0.05. So what we've basically done here is we have a unique situation where we have accuracy, we have the outer frame being done in one go using the insert function, and we have the internal width of those internal frames running vertically being controlled by that chamfer parameter. So basically that is quite an accurate way of setting up your window frames, and it allows you to have that accuracy that you may be looking for. It does obviously take slightly longer. Then the rest of the process is exactly the same as we did earlier, so we're going to detach that and then we're going to tessellate in a shell. So I'm not going to re-show you that entire process. Instead, what I'd like to do is I'd like to just speak about for about a second or two about how I like to organize layers and how I like to get the colors just to make sense to me in the viewport. So in the layer manager, I've gone and before the beginning of this lesson added 2 more layers, and it's a good idea before you start creating the objects to make sure that you already are working on the correct layer. So I'm going to just now manually go and assign these frames and the glass objects to the frame and glass layer. And then what I like to do, just in terms of color, you'll notice that these are different colors now, and that can be quite confusing. I like to generally see objects of a similar layer on the same color, just to have that ease of visual sort of understanding of what you have on your viewport. So you can go first of all and click on the color swatch in the top right and just untick assign random colors. Then you can choose for yourself a set of palette or a palette choice of custom colors. If you do not want to work with these, you also have the option of your AutoCAD colors. These ones are quite pleasant to work with since they're not too saturated. These ones can be a little bit jarring on your eyes and a little bit too psychedelic. So I like to create my own palette, which is a little bit more toned down and earthy. So with that out the way, the other thing that I like to set from the beginning as soon as I set up my layers is basically the layer properties. So if you click on layer property, you can choose the color that that layer will have. So let's say we want all of our frames to have this dark blue color, and we want all of the glass to have a glassy green blue color. Then what you want to do is you want to then select all your frames in your scene, and you want to right click on that, go to object properties, and then just choose the color for all those objects to be by layer. then you're going to have that layer basically overriding the parameter for that layer, overriding all of these objects, the color of those objects, and you're going to have a much more visually pleasant scene to look at. So you'll basically understand very quickly what your layers are, and it'll actually speed up your workflow. Even though it does seem a little bit time consuming, I have found that if I'm working with a very messy scene where I don't understand the layers, everything's a different color, then instead of that being simple, it actually ends up slowing me down because I don't have any overview of what's happening. So this lesson was just about that. And one more thing that I'd just like to add just before I finish this lesson and move on to the more exciting large window that we have here is when copying objects, for example, in our scenario, we have a symmetrical situation. So you can choose to either instance copy your objects across, or you can choose to mirror them. And it's a good idea to know which of the two you want to use. And in our case, our window is pretty much bilaterally symmetrical, so there isn't any difference between the one or the other. But let's say that your client wants to add a few verticals only to the first two bays. If you had gone and done an instance copy, then those two bays would appear on this side, and that's not necessarily what you want. So if your design is symmetrical, think about rather using a mirror when you create a copy instead of an instance, so that you have those properties already working for you as you set up your model. So for example, here what I would want to do is I could either, if I really was in a rush, and I wouldn't really recommend this, but I could just add a mirror modifier onto the entire object. The reason why I don't recommend it is I don't believe it to be too accurate, and you could basically create a copy. And these two are already instanced, that's why you're seeing this happening here, which, as I mentioned, is not a good idea because you don't want to uninstance them because then you lose that connection. But already you can see that you very quickly have a setup happening, it's mirrored, and that can be one solution. What I do recommend you do is that you create a instance, and then instead of rotating it by 180 degrees, meaning that whatever you change here will be affected here, it would be much better to go and create a mirror of that instance, and then you still have that mirrored effect happening. In other words, if you change something here, it will change something here, and that's really what you want on this type of design, because we do have a symmetrical design working for us. So now the only thing I need to do is I need to move this into place. So let me just snap it onto the CAD data below it, and that basically finishes that part of the model. Over here I can see that I need to move this ever so slightly, so I see that this actually hadn't been moved in the right place. So I can go in and just modify that now slightly, and I'll have to modify the glass as well. So once those tiny little tweaks are done, you can see how quick and easy it is to change all of this. And I can now go and add my shell modifiers just like I had done to the other elements of the glass. So there you have it. That's it for this lesson. It was a bit of a fill-in lesson, so a bit of repetition from the last one, but hopefully it showed you another third technique and just gave you a few more tips and insights into how you can work with multiple windows within your scene, choosing to either instance them or mirror them or copy them if you don't want that relationship. So there you have it. So next lesson will be all about this main door facade. We're finally going to get to that, and we're going to discuss that in the next lesson. So hang around for that.